She was the kind of girl most people didn't notice. In the classroom, she always sat near the back, close to the wall, where she felt safe. She didn't talk much, not because she had nothing to say, but because she had learned that staying quiet meant staying out of trouble. Her clothes were clean but old, often worn more than once. Her shoes were scuffed, and her backpack had a broken zipper that she fixed with a small pin. None of this made her stand out in a good way. To most people, she was just another student passing through the music school. The music school itself looked impressive from the outside. Tall windows, polished floors, framed photos of past students who had gone on to perform on big stages. Inside, the halls were always filled with the sound of instruments, pianos, violins, and voices warming up. Many students came from families who could afford private lessons and new instruments. Their parents waited in the lobby, talking proudly about competitions and future careers. The girl usually came alone. Sometimes her mother dropped her off quickly before going to work. But most days, she walked there by herself. She loved music more than anything, especially the piano. But unlike most students, she didn't have a proper piano at home. What she had was an old upright piano that someone had given her family years ago. A few keys were chipped, and one pedal didn't work at all. Some notes sounded softer than they should, others a bit sharp. Still, every evening, she sat in front of it and played. When the house was quiet, music became her safe place. She practiced not because someone told her to, but because she needed it. Music helped her forget how hard life felt sometimes. At school, things were different. Her piano teacher was known as strict and demanding. Many people respected him because his best students often won prizes. He believed strongly in discipline and perfection. Mistakes were not treated gently in his class. If someone played a wrong note, he pointed it out immediately, sometimes loudly. He believed pressure made students stronger. But pressure did not affect everyone the same way. From the beginning, he didn't think much of her. She wasn't fast enough when reading notes. Her technique wasn't polished, and she didn't play loudly or confidently. She played carefully, as if afraid of making a mistake. The teacher saw this as weakness. During lessons, he often focused on other students, correcting them, praising them, pushing them harder. When it came to her, his comments were short and cold. "You need to practice more," he would say, without asking about her situation. "This is not good enough, or you are falling behind." Sometimes, he made comments that were not directed at her directly, but everyone knew who he meant. He talked about how some students lacked natural talent, how not everyone was meant to be a musician. He said that music was not a hobby for people who couldn't commit fully. Each time he said these things, his eyes seemed to pass over her, just long enough to make her feel small. The other students noticed too. Some felt uncomfortable. Others quietly agreed with him. She tried harder. She woke up earlier to practice before school. She played late into the night, even when her fingers hurt. She watched free videos online, trying to learn techniques she couldn't afford to be taught privately. Still, no matter how much effort she put in, it never seemed to be enough in that classroom. Every lesson felt like a test she was failing. One afternoon, the class was larger than usual. Several students were present, along with a few parents sitting quietly at the back of the room. The teacher seemed more serious that day. He walked around the room with his hands behind his back, listening to students one by one as they played short pieces. When it was her turn earlier that week, she had made a small mistake. Nothing major, just a missed note. But the teacher hadn't forgotten. As the lesson continued, he began talking about standards. He said music required honesty and courage. Then his tone changed. He spoke about students who wasted time pretending to be something they were not. He said it was unfair to others who worked hard and deserved to move forward. The room grew quiet. Everyone could feel the tension. Then he looked straight at her. He said that sometimes people needed a reality check. He said that if someone truly believed they belonged at the piano, they should be able to prove it. His voice was calm but sharp. He suggested that maybe it was time for her to show everyone what she could really do. The way he said it made it clear he didn't expect much. Her heart started beating fast. She felt her face grow warm. She could feel the eyes of her classmates on her, some curious, some uncomfortable. She wanted to disappear. Part of her hoped he would change his mind, move on to someone else. But he didn't. He asked her to come to the front and sit at the piano. For a moment, she didn't move. Her hands were cold. Her thoughts raced. She knew what this meant. If she refused, it would confirm what he already thought of her. If she tried and failed, the embarrassment would stay with her for a long time. She stood up slowly, her chair making a small noise against the floor that felt louder than it should have. As she walked toward the piano, memories filled her mind. Long nights practicing alone, playing softly so she wouldn't disturb the neighbors, telling herself that one day she would be good enough. She thought about how much music meant to her, how it was the one thing that made her feel understood. And she wondered if this moment would take that away from her. She sat on the bench and placed her hands on her lap. The piano in the classroom was beautiful, much better than the one at home. The keys were smooth, the sound rich. Normally, this would have excited her, but now her fingers trembled slightly. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. The teacher stood nearby, arms crossed, watching closely. He reminded her to play the assigned piece, but she hesitated. She knew that piece, but she also knew it wasn't the one that truly showed who she was. That piece was about following rules. What she wanted to play was something different, something personal, something she had learned not from books, but from feeling. The room was silent. Everyone waited. She made a quiet decision in that moment. She decided that if this was going to be her chance, she would play from the heart, not from fear. Even if it went wrong, she wanted it to be honest. She lifted her hands and placed her fingers on the keys. The first note was soft, almost unsure. It floated gently into the room. A few people shifted in their seats. Then she played the next note and the next. Slowly, a melody began to form. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was calm, simple, and full of emotion. It sounded like a story being told quietly, but clearly at first, no one reacted. The teacher watched carefully, waiting for a mistake. Some students expected her to stop, but she didn't. As the music continued, something changed in the room. The sound was steady. Her hands moved with more confidence now. Each note felt deliberate, meaningful. She forgot about the people watching. She forgot about the teacher. For the first time in that classroom, she played the way she did at home freely, honestly, without fear. The piano responded to her touch, filling the space with a sound that felt real, and without realizing it, she had already begun to change everything. The notes she played began to fill the room with a strange kind of magic. At first it was soft, almost hesitant, but as she continued it became steady and flowing like a river finding its path. Every key she pressed told a piece of her story, her struggles, her dreams, her quiet determination. The sound was honest, unpolished in the way of a student still learning, but it carried something that no perfection could match. Feeling, the other students sat frozen. Some leaned forward slightly, as if trying to catch every note. Some had their hands resting on their laps so tightly that their knuckles were white. The parents in the back, who had come to watch their own children, suddenly had their attention drawn to this quiet girl at the piano. They weren't expecting anything special, and yet there she was, filling the space with something none of them had predicted. The teacher, who had been standing tall and confident moments ago, now looked uncertain. His eyes narrowed, but not in anger. It was curiosity mixed with disbelief. He had expected her to struggle, to make mistakes that would confirm his opinion of her. But she was playing something entirely her own, something no one had asked her to play. And she was playing it beautifully. Every note seemed to reach beyond the piano and touch something deep inside the listeners. There was no hurry, no attempt to impress with speed or volume. Instead, there was patience, care, and emotion. She played as if she were telling a story that had been trapped inside her for years, a story that had been waiting for this moment to be told. Some of the students felt a lump rise in their throats. Even the more confident performers, used to winning competitions and applause, couldn't look away. As she continued, the teacher moved slightly, almost unconsciously, closer to the piano. He watched her hands, the way her fingers curved around the keys, how she balanced delicacy with determination. There were small imperfections, a note that was slightly off, a pause here and there, but none of it mattered. The music spoke far louder than those mistakes. She remembered the nights at home, playing on her old piano with one broken key and a pedal that didn't work. She remembered how she had imagined herself in moments like this, sitting in a room full of people, letting her music be heard. Even if no one clapped afterward, she thought about the hours she spent practicing alone, feeling the vibration of the keys under her fingers, dreaming of this exact feeling the moment when the music itself would do the talking, her mind emptied of fear. For the first time in front of an audience, she was no longer thinking about what the teacher might say or what the other students thought of her. Her focus was only on the piano and the music. Each note flowed naturally into the next. She let her fingers move instinctively, trusting her instincts and the countless hours she had spent learning on her own. The silence in the room grew heavy. No one spoke, no one shuffled in their seats. The only sound was the piano. It was as if time had slowed, as if everyone present had been pulled into the music. Even the teacher, who was known for his strictness and sharp criticism, seemed unable to move. He could no longer see a failing student. All he saw was someone who had courage, someone who had something real to give, something no amount of judgment or expectation could erase. Some of the other students began to look at each other, whispering quietly under their breaths. "She's good," one said. Another shook their head in disbelief. "I didn't think she could play like this." It underestimated her. Many had assumed she would fumble, that she would stop halfway through, that the music would fall apart under the pressure of so many eyes watching. But she had proven them wrong. The parents in the back were watching with wide eyes. A few had even leaned forward in their seats, holding their breaths. They could see that this was more than just a recital or a class exercise. This was a moment where someone's inner strength, her hidden talent, and her love for music were shining brighter than any polished performance. They had seen her hands move more confidently now. She felt the melody rise and fall, softening in some parts, growing stronger in others. Each note carried a piece of her heart. She didn't care if she played perfectly. She only cared that the story in her mind and heart was reaching the people around her. And it was. Everyone in the room felt it, whether they wanted to admit it or not. The teacher's expression had changed. His face, once stern and certain, now reflected surprise. He could no longer pretend he had seen all there was to see in this girl. For a long moment, he simply watched her, listening, absorbing, realizing that all his assumptions had been wrong. He had judged her by appearances, by technique, by the speed of her notes, by the polish of her performance, but none of that had captured the most important thing, her passion. Her courage, her voice. By the middle of the piece, she felt a shift within herself. She had started out nervous, unsure, hesitant. But now her confidence was growing, not in the sense of arrogance or pride, but in the quiet knowledge that she was doing exactly what she was meant to do. Music was not just about the notes on the page or the applause of others. It was about expressing what she felt and letting that feeling touch someone else. She looked up for a moment, not directly at anyone, just above the piano keys, and noticed a few students leaning forward, fully absorbed. She could feel their attention, their surprise, their awe. She didn't play for them, though. She played for herself and for the music. She let every mistake, every uneven note, every hesitation be part of the story. It didn't matter that the music wasn't perfect. What mattered was the honesty, the courage, the willingness to keep going even. When everyone expected her to fail, the room was completely silent when she finished the first part of the song. Her fingers hovered above the keys for a moment as if saying goodbye to something intimate and then slowly lifted. The echo of the last note lingered in the air. For a few seconds, nobody moved, nobody breathed too loudly. The silence wasn't awkward. It was heavy with emotion. Then, almost involuntarily, the teacher took a small step forward. He cleared his throat, but it wasn't a correction or criticism. It was a pause, a recognition. For the first time, he seemed unsure of what to say. His eyes met hers for a brief moment, and there was no judgment there, only acknowledgement. He had no words yet to define what he had just witnessed. The other students were beginning to murmur quietly among themselves. Some in disbelief, some with admiration. Some of them had tears in their eyes, though they tried to hide it. They had never imagined this quiet girl, who always sat at the back of the class, could produce something so moving. She had broken the expectations and assumptions that had been placed on her. Even the parents were quiet, some exchanging small glances, realizing that they were witnessing a special moment. Many of them had been accustomed to seeing talent that was polished, perfect, rehearsed. What they hadn't expected was a performance that felt real, honest, and filled with emotion. This young girl had given them something much rarer than technical skills. She had given them a glimpse into her soul. The girl sat quietly for a moment, letting the final sound fade. Her heart was still racing, her hands slightly trembling. She had done something she had only dreamed of, something that had seemed impossible just minutes before. And yet, in that moment, she felt an incredible sense of calm. She had faced the judgment, the expectation, the pressure. And she had survived, and more than that, she had shined. The teacher finally spoke. His voice was softer than usual, careful. "That was unexpected," he said. There was no insult, no criticism, no sarcasm, just recognition. It was a small acknowledgement, but it carried a weight she had never heard from him before. For once, he didn't see a student who was failing. He saw someone with courage, someone willing to take risks, someone who could move others with music. Some of the students began to clap quietly, and then more joined in. It wasn't a huge applause, not yet, but it was enough to break the spell in the room. She smiled faintly, a mix of relief and pride. She had not only played the piano, she had shared herself, and others had seen it. In that moment, something inside her shifted. She realized that it didn't matter how long it took, how many mistakes she made, or how many people doubted her. What mattered was the courage to try, the willingness to be seen, and the dedication to follow her passion. She had taken the first step towards something bigger than herself, and she knew it. The teacher remained silent for a few more seconds, then moved on to the next student. But the air had changed. His authority was still present, but it had softened. He would never underestimate her again. And as for the other students, they would carry the memory of this moment with them, remembering that talent and courage could appear where least expected, in the quietest corners of a room. From the hands of someone who had been overlooked for far too long, the girl returned to her seat, trying to act calm, but her heart was still racing. She could feel the eyes on her, some curious, some respectful, some a little envious. It didn't matter. She had proven something, not to them, not to the teacher, but to herself. She had proved that she belonged, not because she followed every rule, not because she was perfect, but because she had the courage to express what was inside her, and in that quiet moment, sitting at the back of the room again, she knew that something had changed, not just in the classroom, but in herself. After the first performance, the room seemed different, almost lighter, but also heavier in a way she could feel. It wasn't just the sound of the piano. It was the silence that followed, the feeling of having done something that had surprised everyone, including herself. Even the teacher, known for his strictness and sharp words, had looked at her differently. For the first time, he had seemed unsure, almost hesitant, as if he was trying to understand something new. She returned to her seat quietly, not looking around too much. She didn't want to seem like she was seeking attention. Yet she could feel the eyes of her classmates following her. Some were staring in disbelief, some with admiration, and a few with what seemed like regret for ever underestimating her. She tried to focus on her sheet music, even though her hands still tingled from the adrenaline and her heart was pounding. Every beat seemed louder than before. Every breath reminded her that this moment was real. The teacher called the next student to play. It was someone who had always been confident, someone whose parents often boasted about their child's talent. That student walked to the piano with a proud expression, ready to perform with skill and showmanship. But even their fingers seemed to hesitate slightly as they glanced at the quiet girl. Realizing that the room's energy had shifted, something had changed in the atmosphere. The air was different now, heavier with expectation and curiosity. She watched quietly as the other student played. Technically, the performance was excellent. Every note was precise, every chord perfect. The teacher nodded with approval, pleased with the usual display of talent. But she noticed something missing, something that her own performance had brought into the room. Life, emotion, story. The music was flawless, but it didn't reach into the hearts of the listeners the way her notes had. That was when she understood something important. Music was not just about being correct. Music was about being heard, about giving a piece of yourself to others. As the lesson continued, she realized that people were starting to listen differently. Students who had once whispered behind her back now watched her closely, unsure of what to say. Some tried to mimic her approach, trying to play with more expression rather than just technical skill. She noticed the teacher observing her more than anyone else. He would glance her way, perhaps trying to figure out what had happened. What made her playing so different, so unexpected? After the class ended, most students rushed out, eager to return to their day, but she stayed behind a few minutes longer. She walked over to the piano, running her fingers gently across the keys. Remembering how it had felt when she first started playing, she closed her eyes and let her hands rest on the keys, feeling the vibrations and the memories of every evening she had spent practicing alone. She remembered the times she had cried while playing, frustrated that her fingers wouldn't do what she wanted them to do, and the times she had laughed quietly. When she finally got a passage right after weeks of practice, the teacher approached her slowly. He stood behind her, looking at the piano and then at her hands. There was something in his eyes, a mix of curiosity and something else, something she couldn't quite name. He cleared his throat softly. "You play differently than I expected," he said. His voice was quieter than usual, lacking the sharpness that often made students nervous. "You play with feeling, not just technique, but feeling." She didn't say anything at first. She just nodded slightly, unsure what to reply. It wasn't praise she had heard from him often. It wasn't the kind of compliment that came with instructions or corrections. It felt genuine. Her stomach fluttered with a mix of pride and disbelief. She had never imagined he would notice anything beyond mistakes or weaknesses. Yet here he was, noticing the very thing she had been trying to express all along. After a moment, she spoke softly. "I just play what I feel." She didn't mean it as anything profound, but it was the truth. She had always believed that music was more than notes. Music was feelings, memories, dreams, and fears. She had learned to play with her heart, because that was the only way the old piano at home could sing. The teacher nodded slowly. "It shows. Keep that," he said. Then, almost immediately, he straightened, as if reminding himself to return to his usual composure. He added, "But don't forget the technique too. You still have work to do." It wasn't a reprimand, not really, but a reminder that there was more to learn. She didn't mind. She had expected nothing less. Over the next few days, she noticed subtle changes around her. Some students who had been dismissive began watching her more closely during lessons. They no longer whispered or ignored her. They began to recognize that there was something special about her playing, something that couldn't be measured by exams or competitions. Even the teacher seemed to be adjusting his approach. He didn't give her the same harsh treatment anymore. Instead, he offered small pointers, watching how she incorporated them while still allowing her unique style to shine. One afternoon, the school announced that they would have a small recital for a group of local students and their families. Everyone was required to perform one piece. When she heard about it, her stomach sank a little. Performing in front of a larger audience was different. It wasn't just the teacher or her classmates anymore. This would be people she didn't know, parents who expected perfect performances, and students who were already trying to impress. She felt nervous, but there was also a spark of excitement she couldn't ignore. She spent the next few days preparing. She practiced the piece assigned by the teacher, making sure every note was correct. But she also practiced the song she had played during class, the one that had made everyone stop and listen. She wanted to be ready, to show that she could perform technically and emotionally. Every evening, she returned to her small, old piano at home, remembering that it was the foundation of her skill and her courage. On the day of the recital, The room was filled with parents, students, and teachers. The stage was small, but well lit. The audience was quiet, polite, but her nerves made every whisper, every movement feel amplified. When it was her turn, she walked to the piano slowly. Her hands trembled slightly, but she took a deep breath, remembering the moments at home when no one was watching. She reminded herself that the music was hers, that it was stronger than any fear she could feel. She began with the assigned piece first. Her fingers were steady, her posture correct, and her notes clean. She played with precision, hitting every chord accurately. But her mind was on the other piece, the song that truly reflected her heart. When she finished the first piece, there was polite applause, but she barely noticed. She took a small pause, closed her eyes, and let herself breathe. Then she began to play the song from her own heart. The room grew quiet immediately. The music was soft at first, hesitant, just like in the classroom. But as she continued, it grew stronger, more confident. Her fingers moved naturally, telling the story she had practiced for so long. Every person in the audience could feel the emotion in the room. Some leaned forward, unable to look away. Some had tears in their eyes, moved by the honesty and courage in her playing. She didn't see the teacher at first, but then she noticed him standing near the side of the stage. His eyes were fixed on her, but it wasn't judgmental anymore. There was respect there, a quiet acknowledgement of her talent and determination. She played every note with intention, not worrying about mistakes, not worrying about what anyone thought. She only cared about the music and the story it carried. When she finished, there was a moment of silence, thick with emotion. Then the audience erupted into applause, louder than she had expected. People stood up, clapping and cheering. Some parents wiped away tears. Some students stared at her wide-eyed, realizing that they had underestimated her for too long. Even the teacher stepped forward, giving her a small nod of approval. It wasn't extravagant praise, but it was enough. It said, without words, that she had done something remarkable. Walking off the stage, she felt a mix of relief and pride. She had faced her fear, shared her music, and touched the hearts of everyone in the room. She had learned something powerful, that courage and honesty could outweigh perfection. That day, she had proven to herself that her voice mattered, and that her music could reach people in a way that no amount of technical skill alone ever could. After the recital, many students approached her, asking questions about her playing, wanting to know how she learned that song, how she could play with such emotion. Even some parents complimented her, surprised at the depth and feeling in her performance. She smiled quietly, answering politely, but she didn't feel the need to explain herself. She knew that the music had spoken for her. The teacher spoke to her privately after the event. "You have something rare," he said quietly. "Something that most students never learn. Keep it and never let anyone take it away from you. But remember to work on technique too. Balance the heart with the skill, and you will go far." She nodded, understanding fully. She had learned the lesson of courage, and now she had a path forward to combine it with discipline. From that day on, things changed gradually. She was no longer overlooked in class. She still practiced quietly at home on her old piano. After the competition, life slowly began to change for her. It wasn't sudden or dramatic like in a storybook. There were no instant prizes or life-altering events, but she could feel the difference in small, meaningful ways. The way people looked at her, the way her teacher treated her, even the way she felt about herself, everything had shifted. For the first time, she felt visible in a world that had often ignored her. The teacher, who had once been so critical and demanding, now treated her with a new kind of respect. He still corrected her technique, reminding her that precision and discipline were important. But there was no longer mockery or impatience in his voice. He listened when she played her own pieces, offering guidance without trying to change her expression or emotion. He had finally realized that talent wasn't just about being flawless. It was about being real, being brave enough to share what was inside. Her classmates also began to see her differently. Some of them, who had once whispered behind her back, now approached her politely, asking for advice or tips on practice. A few who had been overly competitive now watched her with quiet curiosity, perhaps even a little admiration. She didn't let it go to her head. She remained humble, focused on her music, and on improving herself. But inside, she carried a quiet confidence. She had learned that courage and honesty mattered more than appearances or popularity. The school held more recitals, and each time she played, she felt stronger. She no longer feared the audience or the judgment of her peers. She had learned to trust herself, to trust her music, and to trust the feelings she wanted to share. Every note she played told a story, not just of skill, but of determination, struggle, and hope. And people were finally beginning to hear that story. To understand that there was more to music than just hitting the right notes. Her family noticed the change too. Her parents had always supported her quietly. But now they saw her confidence growing, her joy in music spreading into every part of her life. They could see that all those hours spent practicing alone, all those nights when she had struggled and persisted, were paying off. She no longer slouched quietly in corners or avoided attention. She walked taller, smiled more, and spoke with more assurance. Music had not only changed her life, it had shaped her character. One day, the school announced an opportunity for students to perform at a larger city event, a music showcase where selected students could perform in front of a broader audience. She felt nervous when she heard the announcement. The thought of performing in front of so many strangers, so many people whose opinions mattered in ways she couldn't predict, made her stomach tighten. But she also felt a spark of excitement. She knew this was another chance to share her music and her story. Her teacher noticed her hesitation and spoke to her quietly. "You are ready for this," he said. "Not because you are perfect, but because you have something most students never have. You play with courage, with honesty, and that is what people will remember. Trust yourself." She thought about his words for a long time. Trusting herself was not always easy. She had spent so much time doubting, worrying, and fearing failure. But she realized that the moments she had been most proud, the moments when she had truly shined, were the ones when she had dared to be herself. If she played from her heart, she knew she could face anything. The day of the showcase arrived, and she walked onto the stage with her usual quiet determination. The hall was large, filled with students, parents, teachers, and music enthusiasts. She could feel the nerves building in her stomach. But she reminded herself of the small piano at home, the countless hours of practice, the moments when she had faced fear before. She wasn't alone. She had her music, and she had her courage. She began with the technical piece she had prepared. Her fingers moved confidently across the keys, precise and controlled. The audience listened politely, but she already knew this was not the piece that mattered most. When she finished, she took a small pause, inhaling deeply, feeling the weight of the moment, and then began to play the song that came from her heart. The music flowed gently at first, like a quiet stream finding its path. Each note carried a part of her journey, her struggles, her fears, her determination, and her hope. She had played this song many times before, but never like this. Today, she played it not just for herself, but for everyone in the audience who had ever doubted, who had ever struggled, who had ever felt invisible. The audience was silent, captivated. Some leaned forward, eyes wide, fully absorbed. Some parents wiped away tears. Some students exchanged glances, clearly moved by the depth of feeling in her music. She played without rushing, without fear, letting every note speak for her. It was not perfect, but it was real. And that authenticity touched everyone listening. Her teacher watched from the side, his expression calm but deeply moved. He had seen her growth over the months, but this performance surpassed anything he had imagined. He realized that she had not only learned music, but she had learned courage, resilience, and how to connect with others through her art. She had become more than a student. She had become a storyteller, a voice for anyone who had ever felt overlooked. When she finished, the room stayed silent for a moment. Then slowly, applause began. At first polite, then louder, until the entire hall was clapping. People stood, cheering, moved by the honesty and bravery in her performance. She felt her heart swell, a mixture of relief, joy, and pride. She had faced her fears, shared her music, and connected with people in a way she had never imagined possible. After the performance, several students came up to her expressing admiration and curiosity. Some asked how she had learned to play with so much feeling. Some wanted advice on practice, and others simply wanted to tell her how much her music had touched them. She smiled quietly, answering their questions, but she didn't feel the need to boast. She knew that the music itself had spoken. That was enough. Her teacher approached her once more, a small but genuine smile on his face. "You have grown so much," he said. "What you have learned is more than music. It is courage, honesty, and strength. Never forget that. You have the power to touch people, not just with skill, but with your heart." She nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. She realized that everything she had been through, the doubt, the fear, the hours of lonely practice, had led her to this moment. She had proven to herself that she belonged, that her voice mattered, and that courage could overcome fear. In the days and weeks that followed, she continued to practice and perform, growing stronger and more confident with each note. She no longer felt invisible in her school or in her community. People respected her, not only for her skill, but for her determination and authenticity. She had become an inspiration to her peers, showing them that courage and honesty mattered as much as talent. Her family noticed the change as well. She was no longer quiet and withdrawn. She spoke more, smiled more, and carried herself with a sense of pride and confidence. They had always believed in her, but now she believed in herself as well. Music had become more than a passionate, had become a way for her to express herself, to connect with others, and to face the world with courage. Looking back, she realized that one song had truly changed everything. It had not only altered how others saw her, but it had transformed how she saw herself. She had learned that talent was important, but it was courage, honesty, and resilience that made a difference. She had discovered that even a quiet, overlooked student could rise above fear, share their voice, and make an impact. From that moment on, she carried a new understanding of herself and the world. She knew there would be challenges ahead, moments of doubt, and obstacles to overcome. But she also knew that she had the strength to face them, the courage to continue, and the music to guide her. No matter where life took her, she would remember that first song, the moment she chose to play from her heart, and the way it changed everything. She continued her journey in music, growing with every performance, every lesson, and every challenge. She became a reminder to everyone around her that courage and honesty mattered, that being true to oneself was more important than perfection, and that even someone overlooked could shine brightly when they dared to believe in themselves. And in her heart, she knew this. The piano would always be more than an instrument. It would always be a place where her voice could be heard, where her courage could be felt, and where her story could live. Inspiring others in ways she could never fully imagine, she had faced fear, defied expectations, and discovered her true self through music. And that was a victory far greater than any applause, award, or recognition. It was a victory of the heart, of resilience, and of the human spirit.